When you're looking at a motion sensor, it can be so hard to choose the right one, and it even changes per hub that you're using or that you're going to pair it with and the automation system that you're going to use it within. So today I'm going to walk through a ton of motion sensors that work with Wyze and that whole system and give you the right one for the right spot. And let me start with one that doesn't work at all, and I can hear the keyboard warriors typing because I don't know what it is about this brand, but some people just absolutely love Aqara. And unfortunately, this one would not pair whatsoever with the Zigbee hub that's sitting in my Amazon Echo 4th generation. Now that's something I have to explain before we go forward. There is what is called a Zigbee hub inside of the new Amazon Echo 4th generations, and there's actually a Zigbee hub in the larger Echo Show and a number of other Echo devices. And if it's not on the list that's up on the screen, well then you don't have a Zigbee hub and you would need one to use many of these. But don't worry, not all of these devices are Zigbee motion sensors that you can only use if you have that Zigbee hub. I have some options for you otherwise, but to finish off on the Aqara here, you know what? There's a new set of devices coming out from this company that I do expect to work, but as of now, if you go and you buy any of the versions that you see links down below, well, unfortunately, they're not going to work. I'm going to start you off with one that is a little bit expensive because I have to let you down at first, right? Well, this is the Philips Hue indoor motion sensor, and it comes with a price tag of $40 US, and that's a big scary number, especially if you have to go and add the Philips Hue hub. Now, today I'm going to tell you that we can pair it directly with here and wouldn't need the hub in that situation. What happens when you do that is you get a motion sensor that can see 16 feet out and then recognize motion, and it has a field of view, or basically the width out from center, of 55 degrees on each side, or 110 degrees. You also get a sensor that will give you 2 years of battery life on just 2 AAA batteries. Now, number one, I like the fact that it's using a pretty standard type of battery that I don't have to go and remember to buy. And I like the fact that it's 2 years, which is a lot longer than what you're going to find on the desk with many of these other sensors. Now, it has a temperature rating of 0 to 40 degrees Celsius, which is actually pretty high on the high end, but I've even taken it below that 0 degrees threshold and it's performed just fine. Now, what it also has is an IP42 rating, and that means it's a little more waterproof than your average sensor here, and so it's going to give you a little better protection and survive in those humid or dusty environments that you have throughout your home. It also has a magnetic backing and actually a magnetic mount as well, so if you want to drill this into a wall with the screws they provide, that's great, and it just magnets on there, and that's a really great option. Plus, it just has that magnetic backing and actually along the sides as well. So this gives you a lot of options for mounting without creating holes in your walls. The other thing it did in combination with this Echo was actually get really far from this Echo and still be entirely reliable. And this is down here in my basement in my home, and I went up 2 floors and was well over 20 linear feet away, plus a couple of floors in between me, and I still had this thing performing perfectly. And actually, you're going to hear me say that a few times with the hub in this device. There are a couple of specifications that really matter with these motion sensors, and they're kind of hard to explain, but bear with me because they matter for all of these. Now, what happens when motion is triggered with one of these devices is that it kind of goes to sleep for a few seconds, and that few seconds can turn into minutes depending on the device. But in the case of this device, what we found when we attached it to a Samsung SmartThings hub in a previous video was that it took about 16 seconds for it to be ready to trigger again and to see motion again. And that becomes really important if you want to re-trigger automations again and again and again. So we call that the cooldown, and in the case of the Zigbee hub with the Amazon Echo devices, its minimum is 30 seconds, and that's exactly what happens with this. So its cooldown is 30 seconds, but the other specification that's really interesting is whether or not it will re-trigger if motion continues. So I'll explain that by saying I was waving my hand like a crazy person after the motion had been triggered here. And I just sat there and I kept doing it. And what never changed inside of the Miss A application was the statement that motion had been detected. And that's actually different for some of the devices that are on the table today. So it will not re-trigger if motion continues. But take all of those specifications and remember them, put them in your head, and then what we're going to do is pair this with its actual Philips Hue hub, because I know many of you have that hub, and what happens with that cooldown period is that it goes all the way down to 10 seconds. However, that will introduce just a little bit extra unreliability because you will be based on the Philips Hue hub working as well. And that's a little bit of an issue for some of you, I understand that. But you know what, with that cooldown reduction, it might just be worth it. From there, I'm gonna drop down the price an incredible amount. We're gonna go to less than half with this Linkind motion sensor that retails at about $19 US, and if you buy in multiple, the price comes down. It paired easily and has been incredibly reliable and accurate, and that is in stark contrast of my experience when I paired it with the Samsung SmartThings hub. This sensor lines up very closely with the Philips Hue Indoor. It has a 16 feet depth and a 110-degree field of view. So it lines up almost directly until you get to the cool down time, which in Samsung SmartThings was 3 whole minutes. That's how long we had to wait to re-trigger an automation. But here it goes to 1 minute. Now, it will not re-trigger an automation if you haven't stopped moving around the sensor. Now, you're going to find a CR2450, so you're going to have to keep those on hand, and they say it's going to give you 2 years, but if you get more than a year, I'll be pretty surprised with this device, with that cool down and with some basic usage. Now, the other thing around this is that I took it around with the Philips Hue sensor. I brought these around my home, I moved them wherever I wanted to and tried to get them as far as I could away from this hub and still see if they were working. This stayed entirely in step with the Zigbee hub. Now let's jump to something entirely different, and I think this is a great option, but the price comes in right at the same as this Philips Hue Indoor motion sensor at that $40. This is the EchoFlex with the official motion sensor that goes with this as an accessory, and it comes in at $40, but when I was making this video, it was on sale for $30, and I've seen these things even lower than that. Now, obviously the benefit that comes with picking up a device like this is you have Miss A right on board here, and this has a 3.5 millimeter jack plus Bluetooth capability to go to a better speaker so you can hear better from it, and it's also a pretty rugged device that you can move throughout your home and plug into many different outlets. Now, the sensor on here, I'm getting it reliably recognizing motion at about 15 feet. Once I get out to that 20 feet, I'm really not having it reliably respond to motion. Now, it does have a 120-degree field of view, so it's a little bit wider than the other sensors we've talked about. The other thing that's really important to remember about this is it's not governed by the Zigbee hub here. It's not connecting to that at all. You don't need this in your home. So this becomes an option for those of you who don't have a device with a Zigbee hub in it, and you can move it wherever you have Wi-Fi coverage. So there's lots of benefit to this, but because it's going through Wi-Fi, the speed at which your routines execute is going to be a little bit based on your Wi-Fi situation and how well you have that set up. So it is likely to introduce a delay into the reaction time. Maybe not a massive one. For me, it was less than a second additional versus these other direct connected Zigbee devices. Let's go back to another Zigbee device, and this is the Sonoff, and it's a SNZB, I said Z, 03. Now, that device, it took a reset. I had to reset it because I had it paired with another thing. And let me tell you, Sonoff, this little pinhole that you have here it took me some doing to find something small enough to fit in that hole, and I don't think that's normally how it goes. Anyways, this motion sensor is $18, so it's pretty attractive up front, and it's a Zigbee device, so it was able to pair with this hub. And I thought, okay, we're on to something here, because it's got great range, it's got great field of view. It's really going to be a great device here. But what happened was, as soon as I paired this with that Zigbee hub and I had one single motion trigger, it stayed on as motion detected for 2 days and never left that. And I haven't been able to get it out of that state at all. So I think we can just set that one there in terms of this, and oh yeah, they're sitting right next to each other. But there's a whole ecosystem of devices that should work with Miss A, and I've been following this company for a while, and that company is Wyze. Now, Wyze used to have the Wyze Sense sensors, and they're not selling them anymore, but they were $5, and there was a time period where we could use those sensors inside a Miss A to cause things to happen. But unfortunately, not reliable enough, and not even for sale since they were that bad. But our cameras have been available inside of the Miss A application and for display on the Echo shows. And that's the V2, the outdoor camera, and the new V3 as well, which is seriously upgraded in terms of the picture quality. When you look in the routine section, the V2 doesn't show up and the outdoor camera doesn't either, but the V3 does. Unfortunately, we have a bit of a hiccup, and that hiccup is when you look at that trigger, it says person detection. Now, person detection, number one, requires person detection to be really accurate and work, and number two, it requires $1.25 from you per camera per month. So while the pricing is really fantastic with these cameras in that $20 to $25 range by the time you get it shipped to you, this unfortunately adds every month to the cost of that. And what happened to me is, number one, person detection didn't trigger every time I would expect it to trigger. It wasn't reliable enough. And number two, even when I did have that trigger, it was not coming across to Miss A as an appropriate or a proper trigger for person detection. So it never actually worked as a motion detector or even as a people detector with this hub. So this is a pretty big mess for Wyze, and unfortunately I'm going to have to tell you to steer clear entirely from this kind of a situation, but it is something that you can keep your eye on, because if Wyze fixes this up, well, it's a $20 motion sensor. It's based on Wi-Fi, wouldn't require a Zigbee hub, and it could work really well if they get this whole thing sorted out. So we've had a couple of pretty negative reviews here, but I'm going to give you a couple of devices that will actually work for you in this situation. And the first one you're going to struggle to find right now as I release the video, and that's because Samsung's really stopped producing the V3 devices, and that's what this is. This is the V3 motion sensor from Samsung SmartThings, and because they've stopped, that has left a gap in the market. But what's happening is they're basically giving this design to a company called Aeotec, and those devices are coming out very soon. So by the time you watch this, those devices might be available on the market. Check the links. The pricing for this was $20 to $25 US, and they are honestly the gold standard in a lot of ways for Zigbee motion sensors. It sees up to 20 feet out very reliably and 120 degrees out from center, or 60 degrees on each side. Plus, it has that lowest Zigbee cooldown time of 30 seconds when working with Amazon's hub. If you put this into the Samsung SmartThings hub, well, your cooldown drops down to that 20 seconds, but then you're introducing cloud issues and other things that could get in the way of the reliability around this. And speaking of similarities with the Hue, well, it has this magnetic backing, and that means you can put it a lot of different places without putting holes in your walls, and I absolutely love that fact. Now, alongside the Hue and the Linkind sensor here, I was able to take this throughout my entire home while connected to just a single Zigbee hub down in my basement. So the range was incredible, and honestly, the sensing was perfect. Now, sitting here very ominously next to the Aqara and the Sonoff is a device from Adurosmart Eria, and that's a really long name, but this device was absolutely a revelation when I paired it with my Samsung SmartThings hub previously. That's because it has 26 feet depth that it can see out from the sensor and a 120-degree field of view. Plus, it uses 2 AA batteries, and that gives it up to 3 years of battery life. All of that for $25. Why I actually believe that it will give you up to that extra year of battery life versus the Hue indoor motion sensor, and they're using the same batteries, is because the cooldown has been extended a little. So this one goes for 40 seconds before it's ready to re-trigger. Now, the other great components of this is that it gives you an extra 10 degrees down on the lower end, minus 10 to that 40 degrees. And in terms of a temperature range, plus I was able to take it all throughout my home and it was triggering as it should be and stayed connected, fully reliable with the Zigbee hub. However, there is one specific feature about this device that is different from everything else we've talked about, and that is the term re-trigger. So, you've got that cooldown for 40 seconds, but if you continue to move in front of this motion sensor, it will re-trigger, and that has some pretty serious implications for different things that you might do with the sensor. And I think about in terms of security and in terms of wanting to re-trigger videos being recorded. Well, that is very useful. It's going to happen only every 40 seconds, but it's very useful to have occur. The other thing is, if you have things that you want to say within the routine or have announced, well, that's going to announce every 40 seconds. So you probably don't want to do that with this sensor. It's kind of in a class of its own. And that kind of a capability actually lines up with the Blink Mini right here. Now, the Blink Mini is $35 US, and it's a camera that's based on Wi-Fi. So you're no longer governed by the Zigbee hub, you're entirely governed by your Wi-Fi system in your home. But there's some interesting components to this. It re-triggers just like this device, and by the way, that means it will take a recording as well. And I actually took the cooldown time all the way down to 10 seconds inside of the Blink application in order to have this occur. Now, what happens because of cloud delays and because of different processing going on is it ends up around 18 to 20 seconds, but that is the fastest device here in terms of a cooldown and re-triggering. So with it sensing motion up to 20 feet away pretty reliably for me and at 110-degree field of view, the Blink Mini actually becomes a really interesting option. It has a USB, the old version, sorry guys, port here on the back, and then it is completely movable here with the stand, and you can pretty much put it anywhere, and you're never changing the batteries in this because there are no batteries. So it becomes a really compelling option actually if you're willing to step up a little bit in order to get some of the recordings. Now, on that recording note, you know what? There are some local recording options with this device that again give you the ability to do just a little bit more with their sync module especially. I love that that would be away from the camera and someone wouldn't know where that recording had gone. Everybody's favorite furniture store to hate is Ikea, and at $10, their Zigbee motion sensor is definitely the cheapest one on the bench here. Now, when I put this into Samsung SmartThings, we ran into some issues, but it worked in general. The biggest issue was it had a 3-minute cooldown, but it was pretty reliable to connect and worked really well. Unfortunately, when I went to use it with the Zigbee hub here in the Amazon Echo, something pretty weird happened. So it connected and it looked like it worked and I was all excited, but then when I went to look at my triggers in routines, it wasn't there, and then I went to look at the device and unfortunately it had come in as a totally different device than a motion sensor, cannot be used and does not work at all. So If this situation gets repaired, obviously this is going to be something that we need to relook at because of the $10 price tag, but as of today, it doesn't work at all. Now, I find within these comparison videos that it's really great to break down some of the situations and tell you what I would be buying for that situation in my home. Let's start with the bedroom, and I don't think you can go wrong with these three over here. All three of them are going to work really well, really reliably with the Zigbee hub. So that's the Samsung SmartThings, the Hue Motion indoor sensor, and actually the Linkind, which I am surprised to be saying to you. I probably would not get the Eria because of that bright flashing. And the other option for those of you without a Zigbee hub, I think, is the Echo Flex. But keep in mind that that motion sensor is probably going to be pretty low in your room and wouldn't necessarily be able to use the full distance there. Still, you would get that speaker and you could use it as an alarm clock, maybe Bluetooth connect it to something else that was more suited to the sound quality you wanted. But head out of that bedroom and head into the master bathroom, or any of your bathrooms really, and the magnetic backing on the Samsung SmartThings and the Hue indoor motion sensor, really powerful in those situations. You're also getting the IP42 rating on the Hue indoor motion sensor, and I've used these in humid and dusty environments for forever. They work great. The other option, again, is the Echo Flex, and this is a really interesting option for that situation. It's a pretty rugged little device, and it's going to last in there. The only problem is those microphones might get a little filled in or gunked up over time. But if you have a Bluetooth speaker inside of your shower that's waterproof, well, this can be the interface to that. As you move into your main living spaces, the kitchen and your living room, well, those tend to be bigger spaces. And so the Adurosmart Eria is my absolute favorite. You can still use those magnetic backings on these two sensors, but honestly, this is going to cover such a large area that it's my favorite within the segment here. Plus the fact that it will re-trigger allows it to be used from a security perspective. And I think those main spaces are the more likely targets for a security issue. And the same thing, if you want that visual confirmation or that visual capability of identifying someone, well, the Blink Mini works really well, and you're going to get those constant re-triggered recordings and the ability to local or cloud record with that device. But if we move into an area like the garage, well, we've got to get a bit more rugged, or we've got to get a little cheaper. And I think the Linkind would be my suggestion there, although I have used the Samsung SmartThings motion sensor in my garage for a long time. Doesn't have any issues. But you know, you go a little bit cheaper, you save a few bucks, and if it happens to go because of some issue out there, well, then you go get another. But the other thing that you can do is the Echo Flex. This is really made for that kind of a situation. This thing is going to stand up to all the dust out there. And even the Blink, although over time I think your little speaker here is going to run into some trouble, but the Blink Mini I think would work out there very well. Unfortunately, for a motion detector purpose, we can't use these V3s, but they are fantastic quality cameras if that's all you're looking for. The biggest thing you're going to need once you've chosen a motion sensor within your home or within your space is that you're going to need to know how to use it, and that takes routines within the Miss A application. And actually, what I created was a number of the hidden tips and tricks with the routines section, just to help people go that extra mile and get just a little bit more out of their smart devices within that application. So go check that out. Otherwise, thanks for watching this video today. And of course, don't hate, automate.